This is an election that we've been preparing for since the 24th of January when we were formed, and by that I mean the 24th of January 2022. We have known for a very long time that this day would come, and I think we've taken a number of steps to ensure that the citizens are prepared as we march towards this important plebiscite. Now, I just want to make it clear that the chief guiding principles that we pin every single demand, claim, position is the Constitution of Zimbabwe. It's the supreme law. And so, as we've said time and again, we continue to demand from every administrative authority, be it Mr. Mnangagwa, be it the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, be it any other administrative body that's governed by the rule of law, strict adherence to the Constitution. And the Center on Delimitation, I think we all saw on the 20th of February 2023 this year, just a few days ago, Mr. Mnangagwa gazetted through a proclamation the final delimitation report, which sets out boundaries, something we're going to talk about together with the Elections Department, and then also just outline a few next steps that the citizens are to expect as we move forward. Now, the Constitution under Section 155 says that elections must be peaceful, free, and fair, but in addition to that, they must also be simple. The voting process must be simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, and transparent. Now, with the delimitation report that was published on the 20th of February, we noticed a number of concerns which are going to be dealt with in detail by Councillor Makone, but it's also something that we've spoken about in the prior two press conferences that we've had around the failure to comply strictly with due process in the manner in which this was done. But be that as it may, the gazetting of the final report on the 20th of February means that constitutionally speaking, we are 6 months away from the election. Our legal department has told us that we're looking at a window of the 20th to the 26th of August in view of the date on which this delimitation report took place. And obviously, citizens have to be very keen and engaged and looking to ensure that whatever is done by Mr. Mnangagwa from here complies strictly with the time limit set out in the Constitution. For our part, as the Citizens Coalition for Change, our elections team is currently seized with a high-level analysis of the report with a view to give detailed constituency-specific advice to each of the new 210 constituencies that have now been drawn. That process is already underway. It's something that had already started because the draft delimitation report already gave us some guidance, and even our prior participation in the delimitation process at district level also gave us indications because we have our own data concerning the number of voters in each of these constituencies. We're also going to embark on ground campaigns to educate respective communities about their new boundaries. And so in this regard, we call upon citizens to be alert to any changes to their polling area or their constituency, especially when it's time to inspect the voters' roll, which is something that obviously we will conduct a large awareness campaign around, but it's important to flag at this stage. It's also important because there's been a lot of talk around ZANU PF is strong here. This has been, given to ZANU PF. As the CCC, we're taking no voter and no constituency for granted. We don't accept that there's a constituency that already belongs to ZANU PF. We're going to ensure that we leave no stone unturned, mobilizing, campaigning, even in the deepest, furthest rural communities of Zimbabwe. We're going to ensure that we mobilize in every village, every street, every town, every city, and every province in Zimbabwe. This is something that has started. It started over 8 months ago when President Nelson Chamisa commissioned the Mugwazo campaign. Our goal is to win big this year. And part of that goal includes ensuring that we've got a landslide in the presidential election, a 2/3 majority in Parliament, clean sweeps in urban municipalities, and also a majority in our rural district councils. Now, our key demand at this stage centers around the voters' roll. We've said time and again that it's a scandal that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, notwithstanding the clear requirements of the electoral law and our constitution, has failed to avail the updated voters' roll. Now, when the by-election period started in 2022, the CCC was the first institution to actually make a demand for the electoral voters' roll, and one of our members, change champions, Ellen Shiliedeng, on behalf of the Elections Department, was able to get the voters' roll as at that stage. But as we all know, there's been a voters' blitz that's taken place and a number of changes since then. And we've said to ZEC, please give us that voters' roll. If it's the voters' roll that you've used for the delimitation report, we're going to need it to ensure that we're able to verify and hold to account the numbers that you've put in the report, but also prepare for the election that's coming up. We have written to ZEC, we engaged them, and this is something that we've talked about. We haven't stopped at that. We currently have litigation that's pending in the courts around the voters' roll. You know, it's a scandal that we don't have the source documents that led to the delimitation report at hand. Citizens have a right to the voters' roll and the final census report, which they used as the basis for their delimitation report. This is the only way we can check that there has been no illegal gerrymandering and malapportionment of constituencies. Related to that is the Electoral Amendment Bill. Now, our members of Parliament are currently seized with the Electoral Amendment Bill. We mobilized various communities to attend the public hearings. Obviously, we had concerns around the way Parliament conducted those hearings. They were not accessible to a wide number of communities, especially on the ground. They were conducted via Zoom. It should never be that way. We should ensure, at least Section 68 of the Constitution says, that we ensure that as many citizens as possible who want to participate in public hearings of a matter that is as important as this get the opportunity to do that. But be that as it may, our MPs are currently seized with debates around the Electoral Amendment Bill, and they're going to push forward all of the demands that we made in our electoral reform blueprint, Prepare, which is something that was launched last year, and something that we continue to hold the government to account. Now, what are some of the next steps that the citizens can expect? Now, the first and most important is the voter registration blitz. One of our key demands when the draft delimitation report took place was that we have to have another voter registration blitz before the close of the voters' roll prior to the election this year. The data tells us that at least 2.2 to 2.5 million Zimbabweans are currently unregistered, which is a scandal because the Constitution says that as far as is possible, ZEC must ensure that there is universal adult suffrage. That means that everybody who's eligible to vote, everybody who's above 18, who's a citizen, must have the opportunity to do so. It is unacceptable that a number of the voting stations, the voter registration centers, are a long distance away from where the citizens are. A lot of the ones that are currently running, whether it's in Harare, Bulawayo, or any of the other district centers, are not functioning half the time, don't have electricity half the time, don't have enough manpower half the time. Long queues are forming because there's a gross inefficiency in this regard. And so one of the main demands was that we have this voter registration blitz. Now, it's been said by ZEC that they're going to conduct this blitz, and so we continue to encourage all citizens. Let's ensure that we register to vote. Now, for our part as the CCC, President Nelson Chamisa has commissioned a nationwide voter registration and education platform known as REAP, which is being championed at the moment by change champion Takudzwa Ngadziwore. Together with his team, a number of citizen volunteers, they are traversing the entire nation, all provinces. They've been to Bulawayo, they've been to Marondera, they've been to Tutungwiza, they've been to Harare, and a number of stations elsewhere. They're conducting door-to-door campaigns, voter education campaigns, ensuring that we leave no person behind. behind in as far as voter registration is concerned. And this is not just a youth movement. We also have champion Councillor Mukwada, who's also leading a women's movement to also ensure that as many women as possible, millions of women, are all registered in the lead up to the 2023 election. Still on next steps, something that we expect and is imminent from a constitutional perspective is the proclamation of the election date. Like I've already indicated, our legal department, having conducted a constitutional calculation, ballparks that if everything is done in adherence to the Constitution, this election should be between about the 20th to the 26th of August. We obviously demand that there be strict compliance with the 5-year limit that's given in the Constitution for that purpose. Obviously, after the proclamation takes place, the next step is that the voters' roll will be closed. It's important to note that there will be a red line drawn beyond which, if you haven't registered to vote, you won't be able to participate in this election. And so we continue to call upon citizens to keep engaged on our channels and to listen and to focus so that we know when these dates are, so that we ensure that as many of us are registered so that we can win big. Now, we've talked about proclamation, registration, and nomination. What would follow from a citizen's perspective is candidate selection. We've received a number of inquiries around what this process will look like and when candidate selection will take place for the citizens. What I wish to emphasize at this stage is that following feedback that we received about how candidates for this Your Movement should be selected, it was concluded based on what the citizens fed back to us that what's wanted, what's most desired, is for citizens not to have any leaders or any candidates imposed upon them. Citizens want to be able to select their candidates for themselves, something that we've dubbed a community consensus candidate selection process. This is something in respect of which a very sophisticated template has been drawn, and at the appropriate time, it's going to be launched so that every single community is able to know how they'll be able to plug in. And what I can assure you at this stage is that it's a watertight process that will ensure that your voices are heard, that will guard against security matters, and that will also ensure that we put our best foot forward as the CCC to ensure that we've got the best, most competent, and most citizen-focused people representing your movement so that we're able to win big in this election. The launch of that candidate selection process will be communicated to you in due course, so please keep engaged with that. Now, finally, before I defer proceedings to Councillor Makone, the courage of Zimbabweans is what has taken us this far. We have faced the banning of our meetings, we've faced political arrests, political persecution. By now, Mr. Mnangagwa had hoped that the CCC would be dead and buried, and there'd be no main opposition that's a voice for the people. They thought that if they took our money, if they took the people's HQ, if they recalled our representatives, there will be nothing to talk about come 2023. Unfortunately for them, the citizens remain resilient and courageous, and the citizens have said, under no circumstances are we backing down. No amount of trying to ban our meetings, beating us up, maiming us, will be able to stop change whose time has come. So I want to make it unequivocally clear. We are going to participate in the upcoming election. We are doing a lot of heavy lifting to ensure that communities are mobilized, are energized, are educated about our plan for progress. Obviously, the new Great Zimbabwe Blueprint is going to be unveiled also, in the coming days together with the launch of the movement. President Nelson Chamisa has said time and again that all that happened on the 24th of January of 2022 is that the CCC was introduced to the masses, but we haven't even conducted our launch yet. So this is something that the citizens can look forward to as well. We applaud the heroic defiance of the citizens in these very difficult circumstances, and we continue to call upon you to register to vote, especially young people. It's our only way out, and it's the only way we can ensure that we win Zimbabwe for change. Brick by brick, they're destroying Zimbabwe, but brick by brick, we're certainly going to build it up. So without further ado, I'm going to defer proceedings to the head of our elections department, Councillor Makone, who can just give a few highlights specifically related to the technical aspects of our response to the final delimitation report that was gazetted on the 20th.
Well, thank you. After this eloquent expose, there's very little to add. And thank you very much, for touching on all the key aspects of the road ahead. And what remains for me is just to pick on one or two areas insofar as the delimitation and the electoral amendment bill is going to impact on us. You've all been made aware that the 20th of February was a watershed on our electoral calendar. And we assume that by announcing or publishing the delimitation report on that date, the president had thought very, very carefully. And in the main, that the window, to the extent that he is as committed to delimitation as we are, they narrows it to that period between the 20th and the 26th of August. Be that as it may, stakeholders responded to the invitation for comments over the preliminary delimitation report. And we don't want to give the impression that the final product that came out is to our satisfaction. Far from it. We talked about the non-availability of the voters' roll as a key issue. We talked about the lack of validation of the voter registration and the population census as a key issue. We talked about the misinterpretation of the 20% allowable threshold for the determination of constituency and ward boundaries as a key issue. We talked about the overstating of the rural representation, which appeared very significantly in the preliminary report compared to the urban representation. When you compare that with the rural deep migration that has taken place since the last population census. And then we also talked about the spectrum of gerrymandering, some of which was pretty obvious when you looked at the delimitation maps. And we expected that the final delimitation report would reflect and be sensitive to these observations, not just from ourselves, but it really was a wide spectrum. Academics, other political parties, civic society. What we said was not different from what other people said. And unhappily, we don't think these aspects were taken into account. But we also know that in the final report from ZEC is final. And we are lower. We then are looking to and hopefully that what was published on the 20th is the same as what was presented by ZEC. I make no aspersions, but it is our right to be aware, to be made aware of that position. We've written to ZEC in that regard, and we look forward to receiving a response. So our overall assessment of the final delimitation report is that it is virtually as close to the original as to the preliminary as you can get. And we are not happy, but that is the way things are going to go. Going forward, we expect that the Electoral Amendment Bill, which is before Parliament this week, will ponder very soberly over the following issues. We've called for provisions that extend the right to vote to all citizens currently disenfranchised. We've called for provisions to introduce real-time results management and transmission, and it's not there. We've called for provisions to improve the voters' roll credibility by making it more analyzable. There have been instances where we have been given a photograph and it simply is not analyzable. We've called for provisions promoting the security of the voter, and we've called for provisions for a predetermined and transparent power transition mechanism. Now, these are the proposals that CCC has submitted, which we trust will be considered in Parliament objectively and also in the national interest. You've heard about all the other aspects, and I don't intend to dilute anything that we've already heard from the spokesperson. It's safe to say this window for which we think should be 20th to the 26th is the opportunity that this country has got to make a difference to itself. And it is the totality of Zimbabweans that will make a difference to our lives and to the next generation. If we don't do it, no one else will do it for us. So I hope that we maintain your interest in our presentations, and we have previously advised that we will be holding the election updates regularly, and we want to come back to the fortnightly updates that we had started. And going forward, there's so much activity that's going to be happening. You heard that there are issues of voter registration, there are issues of candidate selection, there are issues of campaigning, there are issues of the launch, there are all sorts of... so we are going to be very busy, and we would like very much to keep the fourth state with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Makone.